creating the story. There are 4 elements to every story. First, you have your characters. Be sure to keep them to a minimum and develop the characters fully. Throw in a lot of visual words so that your audience members can picture the individual in which you're speaking about. Conflict. The main character of your story must have a challenge to overcome. Next, you need a struggle. Challenge cannot be easily defeated. That's not entertaining, that's not inspirational. Failure is important. There must be a low point for your main character. Goal. This is the lesson that audience members can use to improve on their lives. Make sure that your story is emotionally arousing. It's a lot easier for the brain to recall these types of events. The human brain actually remembers emotions way more than it can remember bullet points. So use the story to connect the lesson, and that way the human brain and your audience members will be able to recall the story, but then attached to that they'll recall the lesson. However, if you try to do bullet points to make a point, your audience members will not remember what your speech was supposed to be about. Audience members find stories are easier to listen to. Stories break down mental walls, so that way your audience members are willing to listen. And then before you know it, you have them hooked. And now you have the ability to bring them the lesson you want to teach them. Studies of the brain shows that whenever listeners hear a story, their brains are far more active than when they listen to bullet points. Stories involve both sides of the brain, the logical and the emotional. So where can you find stories? Of course, personal stories are going to be your best. Unless you've lived under a rock, you have a story to tell. I'm sure that every single person in this class has had a challenge to try and overcome, and you succeeded at doing it. So look to your personal past to decide how it is that you can bring a life-changing lesson for your classmates. Crafting the story. Consider the age, type, and social and intellectual levels of your audience. You wouldn't tell the same story to a class of kindergarten, so make sure that you're telling an appropriate story for this audience. Also, never lie about the fact of the story. Don't take someone else's story and retell it as though it's your own. If an audience member comes out at the end and asks you, did that really happen? You need to be able to respond, yes, it did. Now, can you embellish the story? Absolutely. You can tell what I call fish stories. You know, when you go fishing on the weekend and you actually catch a fish that's 3 inches long, but somehow by Monday when you come into the office, that 3-inch fish has now become a 6-foot fish and you broke a world record. You still went fishing and you still caught a fish. The minor details can be reworked to create a funny connection with the audience members. But make sure that you're stretching the truth, not lying. There is a difference. Using the story. You use your stories to teach a lesson, to connect with your audience, and to help break down listening barriers. Frame the lesson with the story. We've already talked about the skill of framing when it comes to facts for persuasion. Now we're using that same skill to frame a lesson with a story. Do this, and your audience will recall the story. Then they attach that automatically with the lesson. This covers our study on how to create stories.